My name is Jack Thompson. If you had asked anyone who knew me a year ago, they would have painted a picture of a man with a life seemingly untouched by turbulence. I was living a life that many would envy: a stable job, a beautiful home, and a loving wife. My existence had a comforting rhythm to it, a steady beat that I had come to cherish. My wife, Kate, was the centerpiece of this picture-perfect world. At 20, she was 2 decades younger than me, but age never felt like a barrier between us. If anything, her youthful exuberance seemed to infuse our lives with a vibrancy that my more seasoned perspective complemented. We met when she was just 19, and her fresh outlook on life brought a new energy into my world. Our 5-year marriage was built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. Kate had an extraordinary way of brightening any space she entered. Her laughter was like a burst of sunlight, and her smile could chase away even the darkest clouds. I often found myself marveling at how fortunate I was to have someone so full of life and joy by my side. Together, we had crafted a home, a charming house in the suburbs that was filled with warmth and love. Our evenings were usually spent cooking together, enjoying our favorite shows, or simply relishing each other's company. It was a life that made me believe in the simple, profound beauty of everyday moments. My work as a senior project manager at a mid-sized firm provided me with a sense of purpose and stability. The job had its stresses, but it was a steady source of income and satisfaction. Kate, on the other hand, pursued a career as a freelance graphic designer. The flexibility of her job allowed her to work on her terms, and she was passionate about her craft. We hadn't yet started a family, a topic we had considered but not fully committed to. Instead, we focused on enjoying our time together, traveling, and making the most of the life we had built. Looking back, it feels almost surreal to think that everything was so perfectly aligned, that life seemed so right. It was as though we were living in a bubble, protected from the chaos that the world often throws our way. Little did I know, that bubble was about to burst, and we were utterly unprepared for the storm that was coming. As the seasons changed, our life seemed to flow seamlessly, marked by the passage of time and the unfolding of our shared dreams. We often found ourselves looking back at the milestones we had achieved together: our first home, memorable vacations, and the small, everyday victories that brought us closer. Each moment was a testament to the life we had built together. And it felt as if our bond was growing stronger with every passing day. The quiet confidence we had in our future was reflected in the careful plans we made. We started discussing our long-term goals more seriously, envisioning the kind of family we wanted and the legacy we hoped to leave behind. It was during these conversations that I realized how deeply entwined our lives had become, each plan and dream intricately linked to the other. Our social calendar was filled with gatherings and events, each one a reflection of the vibrant life we led. Friends and family often commented on how happy and content we appeared, and their observations only reinforced the sense that we were living a charmed life. Our home was frequently the center of social gatherings, a place where laughter and good times flowed freely. As I looked forward to the future, there was a growing sense of anticipation. We were at a crossroads where we could either continue building on our existing life or take bold steps toward new adventures. The possibilities seemed endless, and our optimism about what lay ahead was matched only by our commitment to each other. It was a time of potential and promise, where the future seemed as bright as the life we had created together. Looking back, it feels almost surreal to think that everything was so perfectly aligned, that life seemed so right. It was as though we were living in a bubble, protected from the chaos that the world often throws our way. Little did I know, that bubble was about to burst. And we were utterly unprepared for the storm that was coming. The first cracks in my perfect life appeared almost imperceptibly. It started with small things: late nights at work, unaccounted for phone calls, and a growing sense of unease that I couldn't quite place. I dismissed them at first, chalking them up to the stresses of our busy lives. Kate was young and vibrant, and I told myself that she simply had a lot of energy that I sometimes struggled to match. But as weeks went by, my unease grew into a gnawing suspicion. I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. One evening, as I was sifting through the pile of unopened mail on the kitchen counter, I found an envelope addressed to Kate. It was from a company I didn't recognize, and as I opened it, I discovered an invitation to a work event. The name on the invite was familiar. Jake Lawson, one of my younger colleagues, known for his ambitious nature and charm. Jake had always been a bit of a mystery to me. He was the kind of guy who made friends easily and had a knack for getting ahead. I knew he was good at his job, but there was something about him that rubbed me the wrong way. When Kate mentioned that she'd been working on a freelance project with him, I didn't think much of it. It was just work, after all. But as I looked closer at the invitation, a cold realization started to set in. It wasn't just a professional event, it was a private party, a more intimate gathering. The thought of Kate attending such an event with Jake, without mentioning it to me, made my heart pound with a mix of anxiety and anger. Over the next few days, I began to notice more signs. Kate's phone was constantly buzzing with messages, and she started to become more secretive about her activities. She would often take calls in another room, and if I happened to walk in, she would quickly hang up or close her phone. I tried to brush it off, but my suspicions were growing. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I returned home to find Kate in the middle of a phone call. She seemed unusually flustered, and when she hung up, she quickly changed the subject. My frustration boiled over, and I demanded to know what was going on. "Jack, it's nothing," she said with a forced smile. "Just work stuff." But I wasn't convinced. That night, while she was asleep, I found myself unable to rest. I decided to check her phone, something I had never done before. As I scrolled through her messages, my heart sank. There they were, texts from Jake that were far more personal and intimate than I ever imagined. The conversations were filled with flirtatious remarks, promises of secret meetings, and plans that went beyond mere friendship. The final blow came when I found a series of photos, Kate and Jake together, looking far too comfortable and close. There were pictures of them at a cozy cafe, at a park, and even at what looked like a romantic getaway. Each photo was a dagger to my heart, revealing a level of betrayal I had never anticipated. At that moment, everything seemed to shatter. The life I had built, and the trust I had in my wife, all seemed to crumble under the weight of the evidence. I was paralyzed by a mix of shock, anger, and sadness. The betrayal was not just a betrayal of our marriage but a betrayal of the life and trust we had built together. As I stood there in the dim light of our bedroom, holding the evidence of Kate's infidelity, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. The storm I had felt brewing was no longer a distant threat. It was here, and it was tearing my world apart. After discovering the damning messages and photographs on Kate's phone, I found myself consumed by a relentless need to understand the full extent of her betrayal. I needed to know just how deep this deception went and what, if anything, had been planned. The anger and hurt I felt demanded answers. I began by scrutinizing every piece of information I had, those incriminating messages, the photos, and the event invitations. I found myself diving into a world of digital evidence, trying to piece together the puzzle. It wasn't just about proving that Kate was unfaithful anymore. It was about uncovering the full scope of their scheme. As I sifted through Kate's messages, I noticed patterns that I hadn't seen before. Jake wasn't just a casual fling, he was a central figure in a plan that seemed meticulously orchestrated. There were references to our future and the big move, phrases that sounded alarmingly significant. I decided to dig deeper. My first step was to contact some of Jake's acquaintances. I used my work connections to discreetly gather information about him, pretending to be curious about his recent activities. Through this network, I learned that Jake had been involved in some questionable financial dealings. It seemed that he had been working on a project that promised substantial financial gains, something that struck me as oddly coincidental. Determined to get more clarity, I started investigating Kate's recent activities. I found receipts for expensive purchases, designer clothes, and luxury items, none of which were accounted for in our budget. There were also suspiciously large amounts of cash withdrawn from our joint account. This financial behavior was out of character for Kate, who had always been careful with money. One particular night, while I was combing through Kate's email account, I stumbled upon a series of emails between Kate and Jake. They were discussing a plan to start a new life together, one that involved significant financial gain. It was clear that their affair was not just about passion or excitement, it was about a calculated move to secure a better future for themselves. The emails detailed a plan to exploit certain business opportunities that Jake had access to. They spoke about how they would use Kate's contacts and my financial resources to fund their new life. It became evident that they had been plotting to undermine our marriage for months, carefully setting the stage for their escape. The plan included selling off assets, securing a large sum of money, and relocating to a new city where they could start afresh, free from any ties to me. Reading through these emails, the full scope of their betrayal hit me like a freight train. It wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated scheme to destroy everything I had worked for and take advantage of my trust and resources. They had meticulously planned every detail, ensuring that their new life would be funded by the very things that I had built. In the darkened quiet of our living room, surrounded by the remnants of Kate's betrayal, I felt a deep sense of violation. The enormity of their plan was overwhelming. It wasn't just about an affair, it was about dismantling my life piece by piece. The rage and sorrow I felt were compounded by the realization that their betrayal had been so deeply premeditated. The truth was clear now: Kate and Jake weren't just involved in a fleeting romance. They were collaborators in a grand scheme to upend my life, and their plans went far beyond mere infidelity. The depth of their treachery was staggering, and I knew that the path forward would be fraught with challenges and decisions I had never imagined facing. The days following my discovery were a blur of emotion and turmoil. Every corner of our home seemed to echo with the weight of the betrayal I had unearthed. It felt like a cruel joke that everything I once held dear was unraveling before my eyes. I spent countless hours trying to process the reality of Kate's deception and their plans to dismantle my life. But I knew that to move forward, I needed to confront Kate directly. She deserved to know that I knew everything. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across our living room, I decided it was time. I waited until Kate returned home, hoping to confront her in the calmest setting possible. My heart raced with a mixture of dread and resolve. I had spent too much time caught in the storm of my thoughts and emotions, and now it was time to face the source of my anguish. When Kate walked through the door, she seemed more cheerful than usual, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. Her light-hearted chatter and attempts to share the trivialities of her day felt jarring. I could barely listen to her. As soon as she noticed the serious expression on my face, her demeanor shifted. Sensing the gravity of the situation, "Jack, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern that felt insincere. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice and keep my emotions in check. "Kate, we need to talk. I know about you and Jake." Her face went pale, and for a moment, I saw the veneer of calm she maintained crack. "What do you mean, Jack?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't mince words. "I've seen the messages, the photos, the emails. I know about your plans with him. I know about the affair and how you two have been plotting to destroy everything we've built." For a moment, Kate's eyes widened in shock, and then they hardened with defiance. "Jack, I didn't mean for it to come out like this," she stammered. "I was going to tell you, but it was complicated." The words that followed were like daggers to my heart. "I'm in love with Jake," she said, her voice steadying as she spoke. "He makes me feel alive in a way that you don't. You're just not exciting anymore. I've been feeling trapped, and I didn't know how to tell you." Her confession was like a slap in the face. The pain was immediate and sharp, but I forced myself to remain composed. I couldn't let my emotions overpower me. I needed to stay calm and rational. "So, you think I'm old and boring? Is that it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Kate looked away, unable to meet my gaze. It's not just that. I wanted more from life. I thought Jake and I could have a fresh start, a new adventure. And yes, I thought you were too old, too settled. I needed something different. I could feel the anger building inside me, but I forced myself to keep it under control. You've been planning this for months. It wasn't just a fling, it was a calculated effort to ruin our lives and start anew with him. My voice was steady, but the hurt was evident. I'm sorry, Jack, Kate said softly, but her apology felt hollow. I never meant to hurt you like this. I don't want your apologies, I replied firmly. What you've done goes beyond betrayal. It's a complete dismantling of everything we had. I trusted you, and you've used that trust to orchestrate a scheme that affects my entire life. The confrontation ended with an uncomfortable silence. Kate seemed lost, unable to provide any more explanations or excuses. I had expected her to fight back or plead for forgiveness, but instead, she seemed resigned, as if she had already moved on in her mind. As she left the room, I was left alone with my thoughts. The weight of the confrontation sinking in. I felt a cold, hollow emptiness in my chest. The woman I had loved and trusted had betrayed me in the most profound way possible, and now I had to figure out how to navigate the wreckage of our life together. The days following the confrontation with Kate were a haze of anger and determination. I was no longer just a man grappling with betrayal, I was a man on a mission. The realization that Kate and Jake's betrayal was part of a larger scheme left me with a singular focus: revenge. Jake had not only shattered my trust but had also played a pivotal role in dismantling the life I had worked so hard to build. I needed to make him pay for what he had done. The first step in my plan was to understand Jake's vulnerabilities. I knew that the more I could exploit his weaknesses, the more effective my revenge would be. Jake was a young, ambitious man who had always been driven by his desire for success and recognition. I had noticed his tendency to flaunt his achievements and lifestyle, often bragging about his lucrative deals and his connections. I began by discreetly gathering information about Jake's financial dealings. I knew from my investigations that he was involved in some questionable ventures. Using my connections at work and leveraging some of my old contacts, I started digging deeper into his business activities. It didn't take long to discover that Jake had been involved in a series of shady investments and was suspected of financial misconduct. One evening, as I pored over the documents and financial reports I had managed to acquire, I found evidence that Jake was engaged in activities that could be classified as illegal. There were discrepancies in his business dealings, falsified documents, and suspicious transactions. It became clear that he had been living a high-flying lifestyle funded by activities that skirted the edge of legality. With this information in hand, I started to formulate a plan. My strategy was to leverage Jake's illegal activities to create a scenario where he would face serious legal consequences. I wanted to make sure that his actions not only affected his life but also his prospects. I began by meticulously documenting all the evidence I had gathered, ensuring that it was organized and ready to be used. My next step was to anonymously tip off the authorities. I crafted a detailed report of Jake's illegal activities, highlighting the fraudulent transactions and the evidence of financial misconduct. I made sure to include all the necessary documentation and evidence that would be needed to initiate a thorough investigation. As I prepared to send the report, I had to be careful. I needed to ensure that there was no traceback to me. I used a secure and anonymous email account, carefully masking my identity to avoid any repercussions. I double-checked every detail, making sure that the report was as thorough and convincing as possible. Once the report was sent, I waited with bated breath. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I knew that Jake would be blindsided by the investigation and that the weight of the legal scrutiny would be immense. It wasn't just about seeing him face the consequences of his actions, it was about dismantling the life he had so callously tried to build on the ruins of my own. In addition to the legal strategy, I also started to spread subtle rumors about Jake's business dealings among our mutual acquaintances. I wanted to ensure that his reputation would be tarnished and that he would face social and professional repercussions. It was a calculated move to ensure that he would feel the full impact of his betrayal from every angle. As the weeks passed, I watched from the sidelines, monitoring the unfolding situation with a mixture of satisfaction and detachment. Jake's world began to unravel as the investigation gained momentum. The high-profile nature of the case ensured that his name was splashed across headlines, and his professional reputation took a massive hit. The consequences of his actions were starting to take their toll, and I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction in watching the man who had so cruelly betrayed me face the repercussions of his deceit. The plan was working, and I was beginning to see the fruits of my efforts. Jake was not only facing legal troubles but was also dealing with the fallout from his damaged reputation. The vengeance I had sought was becoming a reality, and as I looked at the chaos that had ensued, I couldn't help but feel a sense of cold, calculated justice. The moment I realized that my plan was in motion, I knew I needed to ensure that Jake was fully entangled in the web of his own making. My initial steps had created enough chaos, but I had to escalate the situation further to make sure Jake was not only under investigation but also unable to escape the consequences of his actions. It was time to use my connections to push him to the breaking point. I began by leveraging my professional network, reaching out to contacts who had the power to influence investigations and legal proceedings. One of my close friends, Michael, was a senior investigator with the local authorities. We had worked together on various projects over the years, and I knew that his position gave him access to crucial information and resources. I approached him under the guise of a concerned citizen, subtly guiding him toward Jake's activities without revealing my stake in the matter. "Michael," I started, my voice casual but filled with underlying urgency. "I've come across some troubling information about a young businessman named Jake Lawson. He seems to be involved in some pretty shady dealings. I thought you might want to look into it." Michael was intrigued but maintained a professional detachment. "I'll take a look into it, Jack." "Thanks for the tip." With Michael's involvement, I knew that the investigation would gain serious traction. I meticulously ensured that all the evidence I had gathered was presented in a way that highlighted the severity of Jake's actions. I included details about his fraudulent transactions, financial misconduct, and the shady investments he was involved in. Michael's role in the investigation was pivotal. His reputation and expertise would lend credibility to the claims. Simultaneously, I began orchestrating a series of incidents that would further incriminate Jake. I planted subtle but crucial pieces of evidence that would lead investigators directly to him. This involved strategically placing documents and records that linked him to illegal activities. I used my knowledge of his routines and weaknesses to set up situations where he would be caught red-handed. One of the key pieces of evidence I manipulated was a series of forged emails and financial reports that implicated Jake in money laundering. I created these documents with care, ensuring they were convincing enough to withstand scrutiny. These forgeries were designed to appear as if they had been part of Jake's official transactions, linking him directly to criminal activities. As the investigation into Jake's financial activities intensified, I made sure to keep a close watch on the unfolding events. I knew that the more pressure I applied, the more likely it was that Jake would crack under the weight of the evidence. His name began appearing in local news stories, and the allegations against him became a subject of public interest. The walls were closing in, and Jake's anxiety was palpable. To ensure that suspicion remained squarely on Jake, I continued to spread misinformation subtly. I leaked details about his involvement in various illicit activities to financial journalists and bloggers, who eagerly picked up the story. I made sure that the narrative was framed in a way that left no room for doubt about his guilt. The turning point came when Jake was called in for questioning by the authorities. The pressure of the investigation, combined with the mounting public scrutiny, started to take its toll on him. His once confident demeanor began to falter, and his attempts to explain away the evidence only seemed to make him look more suspicious. Finally, the inevitable happened. Jake was arrested and charged with multiple counts of financial fraud and money laundering. The arrest was widely reported, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. The scandal had not only destroyed his career but also his reputation. The life he had so carefully constructed on the back of deceit and betrayal was in ruins. As I watched the events unfold, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. My plan had worked to perfection, and Jake's downfall was a testament to the meticulous effort I had put into ensuring his exposure and arrest. The retribution I sought had been delivered, and as I reflected on the chaos I had unleashed, I realized that the scales of justice had, at least in part, been balanced. The day Jake was finally taken into custody, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and finality. The culmination of my plan was just the beginning of what I considered the ultimate confrontation. I needed to see him face to face, to let him understand the full weight of his actions and the destruction they had wrought. I arranged a visit to the county jail where Jake was being held, prepared to deliver the final blow to his crumbling world. The visit was scheduled for a late afternoon. I arrived at the stark, gray facility, the cold, clinical environment of the jail, a sharp contrast to the vibrant life Jake had once flaunted. As I walked through the metal detectors and the sterile hallways, I felt a growing sense of anticipation. This was not just about revenge anymore, it was about making Jake confront the consequences of his greed and carelessness. When I was finally ushered into the visiting room, I saw Jake sitting at a small table, his hands shackled and his demeanor noticeably subdued. The once confident, charismatic man was now a shadow of his former self. His bravado replaced by an air of resigned defeat. The change in him was striking, and for a moment, I saw the stark reality of his fall from grace. Jake looked up as I entered, his eyes reflecting a mix of surprise and wariness. I took a seat opposite him, my face expressionless as I prepared to deliver the message I had been building up to for weeks. "Jack," Jake said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't expect to see you here." I leaned forward, my gaze fixed firmly on him. "No, Jake, you didn't expect this at all. But you need to understand exactly why you're here and what you've lost." Jake shifted uncomfortably, trying to maintain some semblance of his former arrogance. "I don't see why you're here. What do you want from me?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady and controlled. "I want you to understand the full impact of what you've done. You didn't just betray me, you destroyed your own life with your greed and recklessness. You threw away everything for a chance at more money and a new life with Kate." His eyes flickered with a hint of shame, but he quickly masked it with a defensive attitude. "I didn't think it would end up like this. I was just trying to make a better future for myself." I shook my head, feeling a mixture of anger and pity. "A better future? Jake, you were so blinded by your ambition that you didn't see the damage you were causing. You played with fire, and now you're paying the price. Your career, your reputation, your freedom, all gone. And for what? A quick thrill and the promise of something more?" Jake's shoulders slumped as he looked down at the table, the weight of his situation beginning to sink in. "I didn't realize. I didn't think it would go this far." I leaned in closer, making sure he heard every word. "You were warned. You had every chance to back out, to reconsider the path you were on. But you chose to pursue your desires without regard for the consequences. Now, you're facing the fallout. You've lost everything because of your own choices." The room was silent for a moment. The only sound the distant echoes of the jail's bustling activity. Jake finally looked up at me, his expression one of weariness and regret. "I know I messed up. I wish I could take it all back, but it's too late." I nodded slowly, feeling a strange sense of closure. Yes, it's too late for regrets. What's done is done. But maybe this experience will teach you something about the value of integrity and the cost of betrayal. As the visit came to an end, I stood up, preparing to leave. I looked at Jake one last time, his figure now slumped in defeat, and said, "This is your reality now, Jake. Make peace with it, if you can." The visit left me with a complex mix of emotions. Seeing Jake in his current state was a stark reminder of how drastically lives can change based on a series of choices. I had sought retribution, and in confronting Jake, I had achieved that. But I also realized that revenge had come with a heavy price, a reminder that the cost of betrayal is often far greater than anticipated. The ripple effects of Jake's downfall reached every corner of our lives, but none were more profound than the impact on Kate. The news of his arrest and the scandal surrounding his financial misconduct spread like wildfire, and it wasn't long before Kate's world began to crumble along with his. The luxurious life she had envisioned, built on deceit and betrayal, was now in shambles, and with it, her dreams of a new beginning. One afternoon, as I was settling into my new routine and trying to rebuild my life, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Kate. Her voice was tinged with desperation and vulnerability, a stark contrast to the confident and self-assured woman she had been before. I agreed to meet her, curious to see what she had to say and how she would try to make amends. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe, a place that held none of the memories of our past. As I arrived, I saw Kate sitting at a corner table, her appearance markedly different from the woman I had known. Her once perfect makeup was smudged, and her designer clothes looked out of place in the somber setting. She looked as if the weight of the world was bearing down on her, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. But I quickly reminded myself of the pain and betrayal she had caused. Kate stood up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "Jack, thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry for everything that's happened. I never imagined it would come to this." I took a seat across from her, maintaining a calm and composed demeanor. "Kate, I've heard everything I need to know. I know about the affair, the plans with Jake, and how you tried to upend my life for your gain." Her face flushed with embarrassment and regret. "I know I've made terrible mistakes. I thought I could have a new life, but it all fell apart. I didn't realize how deep the consequences would go. I've lost everything, Jake, my future, and now, I'm left with nothing." I looked at her, trying to gauge her sincerity. "And what is it that you want from me now? You've already made it clear that you were willing to sacrifice everything we had for your desires." Kate reached across the table, her voice pleading. "I know I was wrong. I made a huge mistake. I'm asking for your forgiveness, Jack. I want to make things right, if there's any chance of that. Please, give me another chance." I took a deep breath, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions. The pain and anger from her betrayal were still fresh, and the idea of reconciliation felt like a betrayal to me. "Kate, I've had time to reflect on everything that's happened. Your actions have caused irreparable damage. Trust is something that can't be easily rebuilt, especially when it's been shattered so profoundly." Kate's eyes welled up with tears. "I understand if you can't forgive me, but please, I'm begging you to reconsider. I've made so many mistakes, and I'm truly sorry for how I've hurt you." I shook my head, the weight of the decision heavy on my shoulders. "I appreciate your apology. But forgiveness isn't something that can be given on request. It's something that must be earned, and given what's transpired, I don't think that's possible. I need to move forward with my life, and that means letting go of the past." Kate's shoulders slumped as she realized the finality of my decision. "I see. I understand. I'm sorry for everything, Jack. I am." As I left the cafe, I felt a profound sense of closure. Kate's attempts to reconcile and seek forgiveness were sincere, but they could not undo the damage she had caused. The betrayal had left scars that were too deep to heal, and I knew that moving on was the only option for me. I began to focus on building a new life for myself, one that was free from the shadows of the past. I immersed myself in new projects, nurtured old friendships, and rediscovered parts of myself that had been overshadowed by the betrayal. Each step forward was a testament to my resilience and a declaration of my commitment to creating a future that was truly my own. Kate's return to my life had been a final reminder of the pain she had inflicted. But it also reinforced my decision to move on. I was determined to embrace the new chapter of my life with hope and strength, leaving behind the remnants of a past that had been marred by deception and loss. As I sit here reflecting on the tumultuous journey that has unfolded over the past few months, I find myself grappling with a complex blend of emotions. The path I chose, one marked by betrayal, revenge, and eventual resolution, has brought me to a point of contemplation and introspection. Looking back, I can see that while the pursuit of vengeance provided a certain degree of satisfaction, it also left me with a lingering sense of bitterness and unresolved pain. The satisfaction came from watching Jake face the consequences of his actions. The meticulous planning, the strategic maneuvering to expose his crimes, and the final confrontation all served to provide a sense of justice, however cold it might have been. Seeing him arrested and witnessing the dismantling of his world was a vindication of sorts, a testament to the effectiveness of the plan I had so carefully crafted. For a moment, it felt as if the scales of justice had been balanced, and the retribution I sought had been delivered. Yet, amidst the satisfaction, there was an undeniable undercurrent of bitterness. Revenge, as it turns out, is a double-edged sword. The euphoria of watching Jake's downfall was tinged with a deeper sense of loss, the loss of a relationship, the betrayal of trust, and the emotional toll of the entire experience. The pursuit of vengeance, while a powerful motivator, came at a significant personal cost. It consumed my thoughts and energy, and the aftermath was not as gratifying as I had anticipated. The pain of Kate's betrayal was another heavy burden to bear. Her attempts to reconcile and seek forgiveness, though genuine, could not undo the hurt she had caused. Her reappearance in my life was a stark reminder of the emotional scars left by her actions. It was clear that forgiveness and reconciliation were not possible, and the decision to move on was the only viable option. The process of letting go was not easy. But it was a necessary step in reclaiming my sense of self and moving forward. In the aftermath of these events, I have come to realize that the true path to healing lies in learning from the past and focusing on the future. The experience has been a profound teacher, offering lessons in resilience, self-worth, and the importance of moving forward. I have had to confront my own emotions, understand the impact of my choices, and take responsibility for my healing process. Building a new life from the remnants of the old has been both challenging and rewarding. It has involved rediscovering parts of myself that were overshadowed by the turmoil and finding new ways to define my identity. I have embraced new opportunities, nurtured old relationships, and invested in personal growth. Each step forward has been a deliberate effort to reconstruct a life that is authentic and fulfilling, independent of the shadows of the past. As I look ahead, I am determined to leave behind the bitterness and embrace a future defined by hope and possibility. The journey of revenge, while satisfying in some respects, has also underscored the importance of moving beyond the pain and focusing on personal growth. I am committed to building a life that reflects my values, aspirations, and the lessons I have learned along the way. In the end, the path to healing is not just about seeking retribution or confronting the past, but also about finding a way to move forward with grace and resilience. I am learning to appreciate the strength that comes from overcoming adversity and to find meaning in the journey of rebuilding. The past will always be a part of me, but it no longer defines my future. I am ready to embrace the possibilities that lie ahead, leaving behind the remnants of a chapter that, while painful, has ultimately made me stronger and more determined to create a life of my design.